Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So, welcome everyone to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer, and I am the Assistant Director of Communications for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. I will be on for moderation and technical support today. So, feel free to message me in the chat if you need anything. Let me go ahead and open that up for everyone so you can type in there good morning if you would like to. Couple of housekeeping things before we get started with today's webinar, which, by the way, is titled Immigrant Integration. So we're excited to be able to present this information to you. We welcome back our presenter from last week, Carmen Stewart. And I just want to make sure I pronounced your last name right, Carmen Stewart. And so we're excited to welcome her back to this information. Couple of housekeeping items is that we are in the Zoom webinar platform. So you as an attendee do not have the ability to unmute yourself. You can ask questions or comments in the chat or the Q&A, and we're happy to facilitate those to Carmen when she pauses for Q&A towards the end of the session. You can also raise your Zoom virtual hand. If you would like to ask a question live, we can unmute you and you can have that open dialogue if you wish. Again, when Carmen pauses for Q&A. We also are recording today's session, and we will have the recording and slide deck available to you following today's presentation. We will send a follow-up email with that information, as well as it will be on our website and Illinois WorkNet's website too. And then we also have closed captioning on today for accessibility reasons, or if you like to have it for note-taking purposes. I know that I do. And we'll start off with our beginning polls. If you could answer these for us. This is for the WIOA Professional Development Committee. We do look at these analytics yearly in our reports just to make sure that we're hitting all 4 titles and other representatives for WIOA across the state. So the first question is, which partner do you best represent? If you could answer that for us, we would appreciate it. Lots of good mornings in the chat from all across the state. So we love that. Thank you. Hopefully everyone's surviving the heat wave. I don't know if it's hit across the state, but I'm located in Peoria, Illinois, and it was 97 yesterday. So, okay, we'll go ahead and end this poll, share the results. Looks like we're hitting mostly Title II, which is to be expected with this webinar, but also some Title I representation and other WIOA partners and stakeholders too. So thank you for sharing that. And then last poll is just, where are you located at today? So we can know this for analytical purposes, again, to make sure that we're meeting, hitting this PD and marketing it across the state. So we'll take a few seconds for this poll and then we'll get started. One, Maura, you said that in Chicago it was over 105. Wowza. Thank God we live in 2024 when there's air conditioning, right? Okay, we'll go ahead and in this poll, looks like we're hitting across the state, which is awesome to see. Thank you for participating in those. Myself and Sarah Goldammer and Tara Schwab from the Southern Illinois Professional Development Network are all here for your assistance today. You can feel free to chat us if you have any questions regarding today's session. I will also be putting information if you would like PD credit in the chat, so pay attention for that. And I'll hand it off to Carmen Stewart to get us started with her presentation today. Thank you, everyone.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks all of you for logging on for this session on immigrant integration. And so I actually like to start the day off by doing some activities that will kind of involve you in some perspective taking. And I'm going to ask you to think about your own life. And then I'm going to ask you to use your imagination just a little bit. So if you have paper, pencil nearby, these may be some things that you might want to jot down and journal. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that. And then you also throughout the session may want to just jot down any thoughts or feelings that you might have around the topics that we're covering. And then of course, I welcome you to share anything in the chat as well. I'll try to keep my eye on that as we're going along. So first, just an introduction activity, and I want you to think about the last time that you were an outsider, whether that was because you were starting a new job or starting a new school or blending a family, visiting a foreign country, moving to a foreign country, when was the last time that you felt like an outsider? So I'll give you a minute to think about when that was. I want you to I want you to think about what were some of the challenges, and if you don't mind sharing some of these in your chat, what were some of the challenges that you encountered while you were the outsider? What were some things that were challenging for you? Russian living in the USA, so most of the time I feel like an outsider. Oh, you have to do a better job of making you feel welcome.
You can also raise your Zoom hand on your Zoom toolbar, and I'm happy to unmute anyone if you'd like to share.
Okay, so meeting people, making friends, finding resources, not feeling confident about expected behaviors. That's a good one, Megan.
We have Cassie, I'd like to share, is raising their hand.
Okay, sure.
Cassia, go ahead. Looks like you're muted, Cassia, but I've given you permission to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you, but I was mistaken. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, okay. Okay, fantastic. These are some really good examples. Starting a new job and not familiar with routines a couple times, not speaking the language at all, learning and communicating in a new language, right? Learning and finding friendly people who are patient with my accent. Yes, these are all great examples of being a newcomer. So for those of you who didn't have a language barrier as part of that, those of you who are just starting a new job, imagine how that difficulty might have been more difficult if you also had to consider a language difficulty. And then also consider thinking about, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, helping to teach my mother English and from unfamiliarity with what kids were like. Okay, wonderful, wonderful, great examples. Okay, so now I'd like you to you're all in webinar mode, so no one can see you. So if you can just close your eyes for just a moment and think about that experience of being an outsider. But this time try to think about how you felt. Feel the feelings that you had as an outsider in that space. And then think about what things helped you adjust in that experience and what helpers arrived to provide assistance. So think about that. I'm going to give you just maybe 20 seconds to think about that. What helped you in that experience? What helpers arrived to help you? Okay. And I'm wondering if you felt any fear, if there was tension in your body, if your breathing kind of sped up as you started thinking about that experience of being an outsider and having to adjust. So, do you mind sharing in the chat who arrived to help you, or what kinds of things helped you in that situation where you're an outsider? What things were helpful, and what helpers arrived? So, people coming alongside and showing you the way. Beautiful community institutions like the kids' school. Fantastic. Okay. This is making me have a Mr. Rogers moment because he's quoted as saying that his mother told him, whenever bad things are happening in the world, look for the helpers because there are always helpers, right? And so you're all demonstrating that today, that there was someone there who could kind of help you through that experience. Google Translate, workers who spoke English, absolutely. Google for the win. Um, okay, other teachers stepped in to help, wanting to escape. Yeah, your boyfriend, husband now helped a lot. All the people were kind, people offering support, finding a cultural translator. That's important, right? Because it's not just about the language. Culture has a whole lot to do with that transition. A speech therapist. Okay, beautiful. And Maria, I love your comment. I didn't wait for help. I asked people for help. Sometimes we have to force ourselves to be proactive. That is also true. Um, so then I'd like to get you to think about that experience. Now, for some of you where you moved to the US from Russia, you probably understand this a lot better. But for those of us who are like, I visited a place and I didn't know the language, imagine if that discomfort, imagine if those feelings of anxiety Imagine if that was permanent. What if you knew that this was not going to be a short trip? What if you knew that you were not going to have an opportunity to go back home? What if you knew that there was no home to go back to? What if you left family members behind or friends behind, supports behind, businesses behind, your home, your belongings, maybe even pets, leaving all of those things? So I just want us to center ourselves in the experiences of some of the learners and workers and job seekers that we help in our work, because for a lot of them, their experience may involve that additional trauma that goes along with having to leave your home and not having a home to go back to. Okay, so the next slide is I want you to put yourself back into your safe space at home. But I want you to think about if something happened right now and you had 5 minutes to grab the things that you need and the things that you want, and you only had enough belongings to fit in a bag that's on my screen, what would you take? What would you grab? So documents and diplomas, I see. What would you grab? Money, passport, diploma, photos of parents, your phone. Yeah, the long-term anxiety is not sustainable. That's exactly what trauma responses are caused by, that long having those cortisol hormones, those anxiety, the adrenaline and cortisol coursing through your body on a regular basis. Your body becomes desensitized to it, which is what trauma responses are all about. Family pictures, my husband, my dog, money, passport, diploma, photo, any living materials, anything living materials can be replaced. Passport, money, photo, pics, passport, credit card, your grandma's sweater. Yeah. I was watching a story the other day about these. It's a story, I want to say it was on Netflix, and it's about this Navy SEAL who was, or this, what do you call them? Like the SEAL team members, who one of them was accused of doing some really, some wartime crime type thing. And they were talking about how they were living in homes that were abandoned by families. And there was this beautiful sequin dress hanging in the closet of this little girl. And I always think about that, like being the person who has to leave those things behind in a hurry because you have to get away. Okay, so on the next slide, and we're going to end this little sentimental journey in just a moment. On the next slide, we have a little clip. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Kirsten's going to share this video clip. And it's just a short clip, but I want you to see because I think it gives another perspective on the experience of some of our students or job seekers who may have been refugees. I'm going to stop sharing now.
1 second. All right, can we see that?
Mm-hmm.
The film is a story of Sudanese refugees that came to America and had to acclimate to American life. That makes you really think about other people's life experiences.
A Good Lie offers real insight into the tragedy of that time and the triumph of the human spirit that existed through those who managed to survive.
Getting to actually work with real refugees, Emmanuel Jal and Gerdouani, really brought an authenticity to the story.
This is called ICE. This is what winter in America feels like.
The story it's almost like my story. I've lived in a refugee camp for many years.
One of the things I said is we have to go shoot in Africa and we have to cast real Sudanese people.
Your staff look so much like ours.
They really brought a sensibility of people who had lived in refugee camps and were invaluable in the process of making this film.
Many church groups took in these refugees and really made it their mission to help them get resettled.
Young refugees wait and wait and wait, and finally their dream comes true. They're going to get to come to America.
There's all
Let's be the guys from Somalia, Senegal.
Sudan.
Did your luggage come down the chute? Great.
And that initiates a new chapter in their lives, but a far more complicated one, of course, than they could ever dream.
In America, we are nothing. It is not true. This is a journey of a country. We have to tell the world Our story. It's their story anyway.
I'm not sure. They seem pretty traumatized.
I have 34 brothers and sisters, and they all died but one. You need to be here with us.
I don't think they're going to make it if they're not together.
The Lost Boys story is an important story to tell because these things still happen in Africa.
It's certainly a film that will make you see a different side of life that I think a lot of people are interested in, but just don't know much about. I wonder if the church group would help me hosting a refugee. You sure they're ready to take this on? Definitely.
It entertained on a lot of levels. It's a great human interest story. It's funny in places, and it's very, very emotional.
It was a really exciting experience being able to make a film like this.
Okay.
There is a reason you do not have a husband.
Hey, thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So, well, hold on. Okay. Do you see a blue screen? You should see a blue screen.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Won't be blue for long. Okay. All right. Do you see words matter, the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, if I can just bring Sarah's smiling face back for myself. All right, perfect. And Tara as well. Okay, so I hope you don't mind me starting today by doing some perspective taking. I think it's important to create a context for this conversation around immigrant integration. So we can think about the challenges that some of our native born students experience and just add that layer of trauma and add the layer of language to what these folks have experienced. And I'm not sure how many of you are, I don't know if you could even hear, some of that clip wasn't quite so clear with the sharing, but I don't know if you could hear the gentleman say that, well, so first of all, there were 25,000, this is 1987, there were 25,000 orphaned Sudanese boys who walked 1,000 miles from Sudan to Kenya to a refugee camp. And they were in that refugee camp, I think, for about 4 or 5 years before 4,000 of them were resettled here in the US, often by Catholic Charities. So some of your programs may have received some of these folks in 2001, 2002. They call them the Lost Boys of Sudan because they were orphaned and we're just kind of really needing a placement. And this story is really, so I think the movie The Good Lies is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it really gives you a better appreciation for what someone may experience coming here. I don't think a lot of people understand what situations some of our students are leaving before they come here, and that is a really good demonstration of it. It shows the whole story, but from a really beautiful perspective, and it's really told from the perspectives of the students and not from like these just really generous Americans, but from the things that the students experience and the helpers who were there along the way. In that journey, the 25,000 students who left, half of them died of starvation, dehydration. Some were mauled by lions, some were killed by soldiers. Some of them were just, trying to survive and ended up eating things that were poisonous. So half of them didn't even make it. So think about the experience of the ones who did and all the people that they lost behind. On that video clip, the gentleman says, I have 37 brothers and sisters and everybody died but one. And the one sibling who survived was also resettled to the US, but she was put in a different household. And that's where you see Reese's character saying, I don't think they're going to survive if we don't put them together. So these are all of the things that, we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we think about that basic level of needs that these students are just getting when they come into this country. And so then layer that, if you know, I wasn't planning to talk about Maslow, but if you know anything about Abraham Maslow, there are these levels of need where our physical health needs are most basic, and it's really not appropriate to focus on other needs until those needs are met. The next level of need is our safety and security needs. And again, so once we're physically safe, we want to stay that way. So we focus on safety and security. Once our safety and security needs are met, then we focus maybe on filling our love and belonging needs. Then we focus on our esteem needs, just doing the things that help us feel good about ourselves. And then that top layer of self-actualization, that's where education is. And I think a lot of times people think of basic education as being the base of that, but that basic education is a self-actualizing goal for our students who are immigrants and refugees. And the reason that I'm saying that is because it's a huge leap to go from being in a space where you're focusing on your physical needs and then also having to self-actualize. And probably, you know, us back down to that basic level and just think about how you don't have the bandwidth for other people's needs and desires, maybe for your job, sometimes even for our own basic care. Okay, so think about that experience for yourself and then layer being a newcomer to the country, layer the trauma of what you might have experienced in your home country, layer the barrier of language. And that is the experience that some of our students are working with. So first, I want to honor those of you who are working with this population because it is a heavy lift to help students learn the language and to learn the culture and then to learn skills and then to learn employment skills and to get them placed and to manage their families. And you're the backbone, you're the helpers that they're encountering. So I want to honor that work that you're doing and thank you for doing that work. And then we'll get into the rest of the presentation, but I felt like it was important to start with where they are. And another thing that I think, so I hope that you'll think about, you know, those activities of kind of putting yourself in that space and that perspective taking as you're having conversations with people in your program who don't understand, as you're having conversations with funders who aren't maybe quite so willing, or if you're having funders having conversations with other community partners who you're trying to work with to coordinate services for your learners, when they don't get it, sometimes it helps to help to create a situation where they see and feel what it's like to be in that space. Okay, so we're going to talk about how words matter, just 3 quick slides about why words matter and how language is important. Then we'll talk about immigration, a look back, a look forward, and then immigration integration. What is it and how do we do it? So the first thing is, I think, so you hear the words asylee, refugee, immigrant, migrant, and I think sometimes people don't necessarily know what those things are. So asylee is someone who is looking to cross an international border because they are concerned about their own safety. And they're considered an asylee as they're waiting to get immigrant refugee status. So refugee status is when our government has understood that you're unwilling or unable to go back to your own home country because of fear of persecution for either your faith or maybe your gender or some type of political persecution, your nationality, or those kinds of things. And the US grants you status, excuse me, the US grants you status so that you are a protected group in this country. And then immigrants are people who come to the country with the intent of taking up permanent residence. So if you are a refugee, you're typically also an immigrant if you're thinking that you're going to be in the US permanently, okay? And then migrants are typically folks who are just not necessarily planning to stay permanently, but moving, maybe coming to the US for work and then going back home for like seasonal employment, okay? All of those are folks that our country has welcomed over the years. That's why our country is our country, because we've been accepting these folks over the years. Okay, so when you hear the term illegal, so legal immigrants by definition are foreign-born people who are legally admitted to the US, and then there are undocumented immigrants, which politically now people call illegal immigrants. But it isn't, so I think that I have a problem with that terminology for a couple reasons. First of all, when you're calling someone illegal, it assumes that you know whether they're documented or not documented, right? And we don't typically know that about people unless they share it with us. We don't know what their status is. So to call someone illegal just generally, I mean, it really is kind of a slur. And so if that's something that's been in your vocabulary, you might want to just remove that and instead just replace it with someone who is an immigrant, or a person who has immigrated to the US, or a person who is a refugee from Sudan, but really focusing on their humanity and not the illegality. So I love this image that I found that says no one is illegal, because it's not the people who are illegal. It is just a matter of their status. And I want to just also note that sometimes it's someone actually had a legal reason for being here, but they've stayed longer than their visa, or, so there are lots of reasons why someone may not be documented at the moment. But I think our goal is to focus on the student who's come to our program for help and service, and then focusing on meeting those needs and not necessarily on their legal status. But for sure, removing that term as it pertains to people, because people are not illegal. This next slide is words matter, integration versus assimilation. I think that's just another important distinction to make really quickly. So on my screen, you see a picture of a cauldron of some food that's been cooked, and it's all to the point where everything looks the same, right? Because I think sometimes when people think about that melting pot idea of America, that's assimilation. Assimilation is you all come and you're very different and you have different cultures and different tongues, and then everyone should be the same here, right? That's assimilation. Assimilation is drop your home language, drop your home culture, drop your home religion, drop your home everything, and do it this way. That's part of being an American, right? But I really feel that America is beautiful and wonderful because we are not that melting pot. We're more like a salad, right? So we're delicious because we all bring our own colors and our own flavors, and we still make something better together than we did alone. But it allows us to think about holding on to our own uniqueness and holding on to our cultural identities and holding on to our beauty and our diversity, and celebrating that rather than trying to just crush it. Okay. So I just wanted to talk about those couple of things as we're thinking about it. Our intention isn't for our learners to drop who they are, to drop their languages. And I feel for so long that was how people were accepted here. And I think that was just a grave, grave mistake. So, what I thought, Kirsten asked me, did I have any other links that I wanted to share? This isn't a video, but I do want to show this link. So this picture on my screen is just an image of Dutch immigrants arriving at a train station. But I wanted to show this timeline. So I'm actually going to come out of sharing for just a moment so I can show you this timeline, because it underscores another really important point that I want to make. And so I'm hoping that you'll give me just a moment. I think that this is, oh, hang on a second. That should not be sound. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm bringing this up for a reason, because when we have conversations, I haven't shared yet, when we have conversations around immigration, we tend to think of, it's all a set theory. So this is the Library of Congress link. Can you all see that? So this is a Library of Congress link, and to me, it's a beautiful timeline of immigration in this country, and it goes back to 1786. And I'm not going to go through the whole entire timeline. Okay, so, but there are a couple of things that I want to point out. So here we have what we're talking about with African Americans and Native Americans, and most African Americans object to the idea of immigration if they were forcibly removed, if their ancestors were forcibly removed. Immigration is not necessarily a term that most people associate with. But Native Americans, then the Irish in 1845 because of the potato crop failure, then the Mexicans at the end of the war, the Chinese coming to America during the gold rush, Polish and Russian immigrants coming in the early 1900s. Again and again, Japanese labor workers, Chinese, Italian, Polish and Russian. So Cuban, Puerto Rican, Mexican, Japanese, German. So all just really to consider the fact that at some point, all of us were newcomers. This experience of being a newcomer is not new. We've all of our cultures, all of our races have had that experience. And so it's just really strange that we have this tendency to get safely in the country and then lock the door behind us so that no one else can get in. We're so grateful to have a country, that embraces us, but it's once we get in, we don't want anyone else to have the opportunity. So let's not be those people. Okay, so the history is we've all had our turn. So that's looking back, looking at immigration, looking forward. So I'm going to read the stats that are on the screen. Nearly 46.2 million immigrants lived in U.S. in 2022, which is the most in U.S. history. I think the largest bump before that was in the 1800s. 13.9% of the total U.S. population is immigrants now, which is slightly higher than the percentage of African Americans in the country, if that helps to give you any kind of context right there. Immigrants and their children will account for 85% of the net growth in the US workforce over the next 20 years. And by 2030, it's estimated that nearly 1 in 5 US workers will be immigrants. So what does that mean? It means that we've got a lot of folks to help transition and integrate into our country. And so it's important that we think about what are some of the ways that we can help facilitate that integration. Okay. Yeah, Native Americans are not newcomers. They are not, but this is just a timeline of different laws and policies related to citizenship. So they're not newcomers at all. So let's see, was there another question? Okay. Oh, I like the idea of academics using a quilt. Yes. All right, perfect. So, all right, trying to move all these things around so I can see my chat and advance the slides at the same time. So in the chat, what are some of the barriers that our students who are immigrants face? What are some of the barriers that they face? Culture shock, language, yes, adapting. Yeah, Trevor, that is a terrible fact. I have to tell you, in grad school, learning about the Native American boarding schools was so eye-opening for me because in all of my education through my master's, I never even heard of it. So, and that was just an attempt to kind of civilize Native Americans. Politicians love to use them as scapegoats. Applying for jobs is a challenge. Language, food, shelter, clothing, new rules and mentality. What's culturally appropriate here? Yes. Finding work, finance, finding resources, fitting in with the community. What about discrimination? Opening a bank account, preconceptions about what's possible. Yes. Self-confidence, being highly educated. Oh, that comment flew out of my view so fast. But yes, being so highly educated but unable to work because of language barriers or because of American credentialing that doesn't recognize credentials from other countries, right? Xenophobia, political opposition, right? I think the folks who work with the refugee resettlements and immigrants are the most politicized part of our field. They're the ones who folks are constantly justifying their work. What about shifts in family power dynamics? Can you imagine if your kids are in school and they're learning a language and you're living in the country and you don't know the language and now you've got to have an appointment with your doctor and your 7-year-old has to translate maybe very personal medical information because you don't have that? How does that change your family dynamic when the child has to do all of these adult things, has to help negotiate your rent or help to explain why you haven't paid a light bill? Like, imagine having to put a child or even an older child in the position of parents as far as that's concerned. Okay. Yes. Okay. So lots and lots of needs, lots and lots of barriers that we face. And so these are really similar to the kinds of needs that they have. But if you can think of some needs that have not come up in the barriers, what are some needs that you see in our population? Lack of willingness to understand is definitely a barrier because sometimes we are very impatient. I think sometimes that xenophobia kicks in with that impatience as well. Anytime I'm somewhere where I see that, I try to intervene and just be patient and find out what the person wants. And then kind of like, even though I don't know the language, translating for the person who's being a jerk so that there's a bit of a buffer between the person who clearly doesn't speak English and someone who clearly just doesn't understand people, right? So they need support structures, English speakers. Yes, English speakers get louder rather than slower. Yeah, that never works. That doesn't even work with other English speakers when they don't understand who does it. Right? Information about the culture, laws and law enforcement, emotional support, help with legal documents. Yes, mortgage, taxes. So gaining academic skills, right? Transferring their foreign credentials if they're able to. Mhm. Yes. Okay, wonderful. Childcare. Uh, they may maybe access to the ability to participate civically if they live in a community and they want to see some changes. How do I make these changes when I'm not a citizen? How do I help be the change I want to see? What about mental health support, especially if they're coming from a place where they've experienced lots of trauma, getting that mental support. I love this image. I'm not sure what the origin of it is, of this hand holding up this tree. Not that the tree necessarily needed it. It looks like someone just was creative and built something around it. But I love that image because people who are coming to this country aren't really looking for a handout. They're looking for support. They don't want to be a burden on anyone. For a lot of people, there's a huge source of pride in what it is they're doing. There sometimes, have you encountered students who are just like, what do you mean? Like they don't even trust that our services are free. Have you encountered that? Sometimes that happens too. Okay. All right. Okay, perfect. You guys are amazing participants. Thank you so much for that. I can't tell you how hard it is to present to a group that gives you nothing. You're like, come on, people. All right. So what is immigrant integration? Immigrant integration, going back to that image of the tree, is supportive educational programming and services that helps immigrants to step fully into the roles that they occupy. So whether that's a parent, if it's a community member, if it's a consumer, if it's a worker, if it's a voter, immigrant integration is really kind of creating a welcoming environment, a welcoming and supportive environment to help them make the transitions, to meet their needs, and to overcome those barriers that we all just listed that they're facing. And it's to help them achieve their full potential socially, economically, civically, whatever that means for them. And they may be different for every student. Some students' civic engagement may be very different. Our ideas of civic engagement may be very different than others. I use the images on my screen first because I just feel like this is such a wonderful picture of a mother and son. And being in that role of parents. So how do we help people fully step into that parental role by giving them the language to be able to navigate space without relying on their children for translation? The interesting thing is because the kids are in school 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, maybe even playing with friends on the weekends, they're getting bombarded with that language. And so they tend to pick it up. It's like it is actually trial by fire immersion. If that they have to where they're learning language and culture are all like rapid fire. So often parents are dependent on the kids because the parent education isn't for as long. They don't have the same intensity. Excuse me. Also, immigrant integration is focused on equity, making sure that people have access to resources and inclusion, making sure that they're a part of the community and a part of the decision making, which is part of why it's so important for our programs to help them to feel included and to feel connected and to help them navigate some of these spaces that they have to navigate. All right. So I think it's important to look at the ways that immigrant integration helps everyone, right? So when we ensure that immigrants can capitalize on their current level of education experience and access additional education and training, it helps the whole community prosper, right? It's to our benefit to help students in that space. And actually, I'm going to take a little aside here because I meant to mention this. So when we talked about the Good Lie and the Lost Boys of Sudan, I want to share with you that I worked for a program that received some of those students in 2000. I think they started getting those students at like maybe 2014, 2015. So I was looking through some TABE data for one of those students because I saw some of the things that I kind of overheard him working with a tutor, and I was just really, just thinking like, how long has he been in this program? Now, it wasn't my role to have interaction with the students every day, but just overhearing them, it made me curious. So I went to our LACES database, which is our state database that we use for our ABLE Aspire program, adult education program. And I looked at his TABE scores historically. I'm embarrassed to even share this, but I'm going to for a very, very, very important reason that I'll get to at the end of the presentation. When I looked at the TABE scores, this gentleman had been coming to this program for at least 9 years. And the entire time, He was in a TABE E the whole time. So TABE E is what? First, second grade-ish, maybe, if we use grade level equivalents. So think about 9 years in that space. Think about all of the income that he did not gain over that 9 years when he wasn't moving. Okay, think about all of the opportunities that he didn't have. Think about the taxes that we lost from him not making the income he could have made had his income increased. Right? We talked to our legislators about the tax benefit, the return on investment in adult education. But we're not going to see that investment if our students aren't moving, right? And so in this program, I actually spoke with the person who was over the tutors and said, listen, you need to move the student to a different tutor, give the tutor different work. And the tutor wasn't really willing to try anything. And the site coordinator wasn't really willing to change that person. And I just was incensed because, this man needs to be moving and making progress. And the response that I got was, well, he's got a lot of barriers and, he keeps coming back, right? So attendance is not a measure of success if the students' lives aren't changing, right? Let's see. I'm looking at Trevor's comment. If we do not open our borders and help these people, yeah, exactly. We benefit from it. So it helps to drive business creation because often folks had businesses back home, and so they're able to get here and get reestablished and start those businesses back again. It fuels innovation. It can fill essential workforce needs. Help strengthen the middle class once people get their footing. It helps to broaden our perspectives. It's a very different experience to have interactions with folks who are of a different culture than you. It helps you appreciate your own culture more, but it also helps you understand that there are lots of ways to do things that can all be wonderful and beautiful, and it adds to the culture. I mean, just think about the food we enjoy in this country because of all of the different cultures who came here and brought those things with them, right? And so immigrant integration helps all of us. This is not something that we're doing to help these people. It's something that we're doing to help all of us. We're supporting these newcomers to America so that they can also come in and be productive and help the next wave of newcomers because they're going to continue coming. We're going to continue to have people who want to be here. And Trevor's right. In Cleveland, our population has not grown in about 10, 15 years. I'm like, come on, we would love to have you. So there are many studies. Okay, Trevor, I think Trevor should do the next webinar. Trevor's got a lot of information here. So it's many studies that show, based out of Southwest America, that show definitive evidence that immigration helps both countries' economies and eventually foreign relations. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you all for being so active in the chat. I'm really trying to stay on top of it. So there are three pillars of integration, of immigrant integration: linguistic, civic, and economic. And we're going to talk about all three of those right now. And then, yes, absolutely, Mark. Yes, othering is a really it feels like a benign weapon, but it is a weapon, right? It's what we do to, like, okay, so this is how I can justify not treating you well, not treating you equally. So linguistic integration, obviously the ability to communicate in English is critical for immigrants to be able to get jobs, to be able to attain better careers, to use their credentials that they earned in their own country to obtain those credentials, to participate civically and fully in civic life, to really be advocates for their kids and their education, and to just be a part of the community. You want to be able to communicate with people. So linguistic integration it's a gradual process, and thank God for all of our ESOL instructors out there who are always looking for creative ways to help students experience that linguistic integration. So examples of that can be things like, using technology to help accelerate language learning. The one good thing about our programs, or the one good thing about COVID as it relates to adult education, is that I think because of the pandemic, most of us are thinking now, like, how do we leverage technology? But there are so many different apps and things that we can use. Someone said earlier, using Google Translate has been a lifesaver, right? There's so many different apps that we can use to help accelerate students learning outside of class. So we may only have 4 hours with our students in the classroom, but we can leverage technology to try to help accelerate their language learning. Another thing is contextualizing language learning. And so one thing that I always ask is, people who, wait, I'm sorry, I just lost it. Oh, I always ask people like, what is the last thing that you learned, right? And so, and I ask people like, as I'm introducing our adult education program to them and while I'm explaining our curriculum approach, I always ask, what's the last thing you learned? And so people think about that and they go, huh, the last thing I learned was, and they'll name something, right? Oh, I learned how to use, Microsoft Forms, right? Okay, why did you learn to use that? Well, because I was curious about whatever, or because I needed it for my job, right? We learn things as adults because we find them useful, because we need them, right? And so it's the same for our students. So if we can contextualize our language learning in the spaces where they are, what I could learn this vocabulary list, that's great. If it's random, I'm going to forget it. But if you give me a vocabulary list related to things that I have to accomplish for my family this week, and I have to use it this week, I'm going to remember it because I'm using it over and over again. Like I'm getting active practice everywhere I go because I'm using the language that's within the context of where I live and work and move, right? So that may mean language around how to speak to your child's teacher about homework or finding a tutor. It may be asking someone how much something costs in a grocery store. There's a local program here in Cleveland that operates an urban farm, and so when anyone comes in as a refugee and they're resettled through Catholic Charities here, they immediately get work on the farm. So a lot of their language learning is around asking, may I help you? Or, you can pay at the counter, or, giving them the language that they need to operate in that job, which makes them build their confidence because they're realizing that, oh, I'm already communicating with people and I've only been here for a little while. Or helping them to learn how to handle the cash at the food stand. So giving them things that they're actually doing. Yes, I love that comment. As educators, we need to be mindful so we're not overly prescriptive. We need to answer to the needs of who we're teaching. Absolutely. I definitely believe in project-based learning. And I'm going to tell you, I had an experience years ago. There was a conference in Chicago called the Free Minds, Free People Conference. And there was this young woman who was, she was a young woman, probably only out of college, maybe 3 or 4 years. And she's the prettiest little blonde haired, blue eyed, just really, really hopeful. I don't know where she was from. She had a little bit of a Southern accent, but she was teaching a class of 12 African American severe behavior handicapped boys, and she was teaching them English. And she said, these kids don't care about this English, but they care about so many things. So she taught her entire curriculum. Each student picked something that they cared about, and that was their project for the year. And so all of their academic content standards they had to apply to that particular project. And the products that those kids, those 12-year-old hormonal, severe behavior handicapped kids produced by the end of the year beat some of the stuff I've seen my undergrads turn in. So, but they connected to it because it was something that meant something to them. And so we can do the same thing with contextualizing language learning. And then also I'm focusing on parental engagement and family learning, maybe welcoming a teacher to your site and having the students talk to the teacher instead of taking them out of their environment and putting them into a school, which honest to God, I worked in schools almost all of my adult life. But going into a new school building, especially an elementary school building, you are definitely know that you're an outsider, and so does everyone else, right? So maybe instead of having them go into that environment, bringing a teacher and a principal in to talk to you about what you need to know and understand about your kids' schooling at the beginning of the year. So figuring out ways to get them to engage as family members. And maybe that could include going to a community event as a family, maybe on a weekend. So just ways of really helping parents to, or helping learners to focus on that building that learning. So think about this. What percentage of Americans do you think were multilingual in 2018? I'll say this from 1980 to 2018, the percentage of Americans 18 and older who were multilingual increased by 7%. Why do you think that is? Because of newcomers, right? Not because of Babel. What percentage do you think? Those are really good guesses. 12%, 15%. Okay, Juan, you have a lot of confidence in us. It actually went from 9.2% in 1980 to 16.9%. So those are really good guesses in 2018. Okay, so, okay, Mark, oh my gosh, Mark speaks 9 languages. Good Lord. All right. That's impressive. He's a polyglot. That's a goal of mine. I'm still stuck on French and Spanish right now. Okay, so just to get you to think about okay, so I just see a message in the chat from Trevor that I can't respond to exactly right away. But Kirsten, if you can grab Trevor's contact information, I would like to connect after as well. Okay, I'm just trying to stay on top of the chat, you guys. Okay, right. So Trevor, it's hilarious. Okay, so I just get that. So as we talk about the benefits, that's also, another benefit is that we're exposed to other languages. One thing that I used to love about going to New York in the summer is I could go for a run in the morning and I would hear at least 10 different languages on a 45-minute run just because there's so much diversity there, right? Okay. All right. So thinking about your world now, so we did the poll in the beginning, and some of you are in work in our Title II, and some of you are working with displaced workers, and some of you may be working workforce. So thinking about your sphere of influence, how can you help support immigrants in integrating linguistically? So think about your role, and then what action do you think you can take? If there's anything, and it may be something that you currently do that maybe someone else isn't trying, what's something that you can do to help support linguistic integration? We're looking for ideas here. And giving everyone time to type. What can you do in your space to support linguistic integration? Okay, so I see I always start with music, cartoons, and movies. Yeah, one, honestly, I think music is a great way because you can play a song over and let me tell you, so a couple things. Music allows people to hear language in, like when you learn language, you learn individual words, right? And you learn them like this. But we don't talk like that. We run all of our words together, right? So hearing songs and hearing words and music can kind of help you to start to auditorily discriminate between words. And then you go, oh, I recognize, like when I listen to Despacito, which is an older song, but y'all know what song I'm talking about, right? When I listen to that song, I'll hear things like he'll say something in the song, and I'll be like, oh, I know that word. Eventually, I'm able to hear more of those words because I recognize more. So music is great because it's repetitive. The students can control it. They have it with them all the time. Refer them to free ESOL classes. That's a great one. Enroll them in ESOL. Include anecdotal cultural information such as nonverbal. Absolutely. Communication habits of Americans or expressions. Yes. Idioms are always so hard for people. I know people who are native born who really struggle with idioms. So yeah, helping students learn idioms and teaching. I try to teach not only English but also culture. I show my students how to slow down stuff on YouTube. Yes, those technological skills that really help support and undergird learning. Project-based class. Yes, I love all of those multimedia approaches. You guys are okay. You didn't even need me today. Promote policy best practices for caseworkers. Yes, I love all of these. Okay. All right. Encouraging students to eavesdrop while out and about. I love that. I love it. Okay, wonderful. These are great. All right, perfect. Oh, thank you. Oh, Mark, I'm making so many friends. I might have to move to Illinois. I'm loving the love. Okay. All right, so let's talk about economic integration. So, economic integration is really about achieving economic self-sufficiency, right? That's what we want our learners to do. And self-sufficiency, what that means to me is that we are looking at students and getting them into a place where they can start earning income as quickly as possible and then transitioning them into whatever is going to get them to family sustaining employment, because no one wants to come here and struggle. No one wants to come here and suffer. None of our students do. And so to me, achieving economic self-sufficiency is getting to the point where they're not dependent on any of our social support networks. Honestly, a lot of times they're not even eligible for those. And I think we make a lot of assumptions in this country about who's taking up what resources. And our biases play a huge role in there. But most folks want to be self-sufficient. They don't want to be dependent on anyone, and they want to be able to provide for their families and maybe send money back home to family members who might still be there. So when they have the resources to excel, to obtain economic self-sufficiency, when employers are able to attract and retain really good talent of folks who are new Americans, and then when they understand what their rights are as employees, right? One of the things you may have heard of wage stealing, that's a topic that people are talking about a lot in Cleveland right now, where you get workers who end up with an employer who pays them under the table so that they're not paying taxes on those dollars, but then they're also not really respecting them as employees. They're really kind of stealing their wages from them. So all of those things, providing job readiness skills, providing job placement assistance, and then helping them move beyond that first job, helping them get that post-secondary education, helping them find short-term training programs, helping them find, I always believe in the idea of a so that. So like we had a student who was he was a doctor, a practicing physician in his home country, and he came here, but his credentials aren't accepted here. Well, what do you do when you're used to supporting a family with a physician salary in your country, and then you come to the US and you're working at McDonald's for right now? I'm like, let's get him into a trade training program, because if he gets into that trade training program, he can replace that income a lot quicker than he can get this medical credential. And that will be his so that it's the job that he does so that he can focus on getting the credentials to continue practicing medicine here. So it's okay to give students something that's kind of temporary, transitional, but to keep that next step in mind and to help them envision what's possible for them. And I also believe in in mentors and opportunities, because sometimes if you connect a student to a mentor in the community, that mentor will have opportunities that you haven't even dreamed of, and they'll be thinking of that student when that opportunity comes up. Like, how can we actually have a student who was a non-reader, living with older parents, terrified, like suicidal, because he kept thinking, if my parents die from COVID, I'm stuck. I have no way of taking care of myself. And so we connected him with a mentor who owns an employment placement business, and he helped him find a job without, he's reading at like maybe a second grade level, but he has a full-time job, fixing and cleaning air conditioning units and heating units, right? So he's developing a level of self-sufficiency that makes it easier for him to focus on literacy, because he's not worried about what will happen now if his parents die. Like, doesn't want to lose them, but isn't suicidal at this point. So really helping people to get to a space where they have the potential to create family sustaining opportunities. So a little quick trivia question here. How many of you know this? Some of you probably know this already, but when are refugees expected to begin repaying their interest-free resettlement loans? Yeah, Trevor, you're making so many good points in this chat. Like, I can't even keep up with them all. Financial literacy is the second unit in my course, Mark. Okay, yeah, we spent my students soaking this material like sponges. Yes, these are great. Dispelling myths around unemployment insurance because people think it's welfare. Yes, right. It's so crazy because like even bankruptcy, we kind of make that seem like that's welfare, right? We make it seem like but that's a part of the social safety net that wealthy people take advantage of all the time, and they don't call it welfare or the social safety net when they use it, right? It's just good business, right? So we kind of use that terminology to shame people into accepting the help that our government is set up to. Is why we pay taxes, right? Yeah. Yes. So Jonathan says, okay, all right. So back to the question. So Jonathan says, I didn't know refugees were expected to repay resettlement loans. Christina says 5 years. Trevor says 75% of all bankruptcy stems from medical bills. Yep. Yes, Aisha, 6 months after their arrival, they're expected to begin repaying. And I kind of equate that to students coming out of college and having to start repaying their loans, and how many people are not ready 6 months. So imagine 6 months in this country, new language, new country, new culture, new housing, leaving your family. You've got 6 months to begin repaying your resettlement loans. Okay, so when they come in, they have to sign a promissory note before traveling. So it basically covers the cost of their airfare and maybe some like housing. So it's not usually a ton. The amount isn't usually like super large. It's not like tens of thousands, but it could be in the thousands of dollars. And they have 6 months to repay that. Here's what's interesting: 90% of all repayments are finished within 3 to 4 years. So folks get here, they get resettled, and they start paying that money back and they pay it off. So this narrative that immigrants are a drain on the American system is false. Okay, so now you know it. If you hear people saying, oh, well, they're doing this, no, they're not. It isn't true. So now thinking about your world, what can you do to help support immigrants in integrating economically? Sarah's got a co-host. Love it. I can almost smell the sweet baby. Right, Trevor. Yeah. All right. Yep. Informal employment jobs they can do without degrees. Yep. Exactly. Refer workforce network partners and follow up. Don't just refer someone, follow up. So Sandra, we're gonna there's a slide that talks about that a little bit, and it's making a warm transfer, right? So if you're not familiar with that term, a warm transfer, if I say, oh, Tara notes, if Tara says, hey Carmen, you should go to you should go see Trevor at such and such, he can help you with this job. And then I could probably go see Trevor, but I'm probably not going to, right? May not be motivated to do that. But if Tara says, hey Carmen, I'm going to call Trevor. I'm going to have you talk to him about what they can do for you. And then you guys can figure out when you can get to his office and take your next steps, right? So that warm transfer is her connecting me to an actual person, warm-blooded person, and not just giving me information, expecting me to follow up on my own. So she's making the connection for me and then stepping back and giving me the agency and empowering me to do the conversation and the follow up and what our plan is going to be and how we're going to connect. And then she may follow up with me later and say, okay, so I know that you talked to Trevor about meeting with him. Did you get a chance to connect with him? Right. Pathways. Absolutely, Mark. Sometimes people just need to see the roadmap that's in front of them. Help them earn industry recognized credentials to unlock higher paying jobs, help them find jobs, referrals to workforce. These are great, great, great. It's like Alina says it takes on average 5 years for an immigrant to integrate and find a decent job. Yeah. So we're the ones who can make a difference in helping to cut that down. And I really think that sometimes we don't think about all of the social capital that we have. Like we have relationships and we have connections. And I think sometimes we don't always think about how we can bring the people who we know into our sphere of influence. Like how do we help them? There's an organization here called Open Table. And Open Table evaluate for transferable skills. That's another good one, Trevor. But the Open Table concept is that they find 8 people who are just volunteers. So 8 people who are in whatever profession volunteer, and they all volunteer to help one person for a year. And so every month they have a meeting at the Open Table, and they help this person problem solve, and they use their social capital and connections and relationships to help support that person. So, oh, you're looking for a job? Yeah, I can help you with your resume, but I have a friend who works at the Key Bank Career Center, and they can help you with your resume, and I'll give you a ride and blah blah blah. And it's like really supporting that person and advocating for themselves. So, okay, Trevor, social capital's presentation can be eye-opening and powerful. Yes. So, all right. So I'm going to keep moving because I'm watching time just tick away and I have so much more to say. Okay, so I'm thinking about now civic integration. So civic integration is the voter education, anything that we do to help members involved, voter education registration if they've already gotten their citizenship, citizenship classes if they haven't, but also helping them find ways to participate civically even before they have citizenship. Maybe you may not be able to vote, but you may be able to help register other people to vote. You can go to community meetings at your school. You can participate in your child's PTA. All of these things are helping students to use their language, build their language skills within a context. It helps to create community. It helps them to feel like they're part of the community, and that's all a part of that integration. It helps them to put a face with other folks who are in the community, to have conversation partners, formal or informal. And these are all things that we can do to help our newcomers learn to be a part of their community and to expand their community beyond folks who've come with them, so that they can start, building those networks and really kind of finding opportunities that are out there. So just encouraging them to participate in civic life, in their neighborhood activities, and faith services and things like that. And I think faith services are often, if for someone who can find like a mosque or a temple or something that's close to their own faith, it can be very, very comforting to have that connection here. And it's another way to contextualize language learning, right? And to build community. And another thing that we can do, which I don't think we always think about doing, but we could also start language classes for us community members to begin learning some of the language of the students who are coming to us so that they can see us putting forth an effort as well, right? So just some things that we can do. All right, so my question, what percentage of voters in the 2020 election were naturalized citizens? Jonathan asked a great question, and I think that he got the answer already in the chat. So Mark, we start at the community level, getting them involved in community events, connecting with the neighborhood library, et cetera. Beautiful. How do you decide which credentials to offer? General labor market demands, general employer requirements, upskilling students in their present line, all of these. Yep. So Trevor, see what they can do. Start with where they are. Start with the assets. I love that everyone who's commenting has such an asset-based approach, like really looking at who students are and where they are. Okay, so what percentage of voters in the 2020 election were naturalized citizens? Mark says 25%. Lisa says 75. Frankie says 40%. Some question marks. It's actually 1 in 10 voters, so 10% of voters. So since 2000, the size of the immigrant electorate, these are folks who came to this country recently, became naturalized citizens and started voting. And these are folks who, like, if you're not first generation, you wouldn't count that. I think some of your numbers were higher because you're thinking like, well, we're kind of all, right? But for folks who are like first generation here and naturalized citizens, 1 in 10 participate in the election, which means that civic participation is important to folks. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That was my fault, Lisa. I should have said naturalized citizen. So naturalized citizen, meaning that they've gone through the immigration and naturalization process, gotten citizenship, and then gained the right to vote. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Nope. And I shouldn't have assumed. That was my bad. I'm sorry for that. Okay. So thinking then, so given your sphere of influence, how do we support our learners? What are some things that we can do to get them engaged civically? I think you guys have already started giving us lots and lots of ideas. Okay. And then there are lots of folks who decide that they don't want to change their citizenship, and that's perfect. I totally understand that. And I think a lot of that is because of the pressure to assimilate. And so I totally understand folks who are just like, nope, not doing it. This is who I am. Okay, perfect. Okay, so tips for immigrant integration. This is one of my favorites. And I skipped a slide, I think. I did. Okay, so the tips for immigrant integration. First is bring the community into the classroom. And one way to do that is by bringing in speakers or bringing in realia, which is basically authentic materials. That's a term that people use a lot, right? Maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Sometimes I'll still hear it bubble up. So that's bringing in things like restaurant menus. I actually read a book about written by Philip Schwartz called My Dyslexia. And he talked about how he would go into this restaurant and he would just say like, I'll have what he's having because he didn't know how to read the menu, right? And so he ate something that he hated every single day because he didn't know how to order other things. So giving your students an opportunity to become familiar with the menu. And maybe as you're learning, maybe as a part of that lesson, as they're learning to read different things on the menu, they may practice ordering it. How do you create authentic experiences in your classroom? I think another thing, role play is such a wonderful thing. How about creating, most folks have cardboards aplenty because everyone's getting packages from Amazon all day, every day, right? So how about creating like scenarios, create like a postal clerk's desk, right? Or creating the desk or creating a cash line or a cash register, or creating like the window at a doctor's office. Like, how about creating some of those scenarios in the classes and doing real role plays with real things? So using circulars from the mail or using stampers and the date stamp, excuse me, using postage and really learning how to do the things that we do in this country, the things that our students are going to use. So thinking about giving them opportunities to role play, going to the farmer's market and bartering, or if that's something that happens at your farmers market, it's like giving them practice doing that in the safe space of your classroom where they're able to then hear other people doing the same thing. So you get the practice of hearing it, the practice of watching other folks doing it, and practices of trying it yourself and trying it again and again. So bringing the community into your classroom and then taking your classroom into the community, maybe going to a farmer's market and helping them to understand how it works and walking through. I will tell you so Cleveland has this West Side Market that is marvelous. The first time I went to West Side Market, I would have never gone in there by myself. But someone else walked me through and it was like, okay, this is how you, because it was just so overwhelming. And I know the language and I know the area and I've been in Cleveland my whole entire life. And my first time I was just like, what in the world? So taking your class to the post office and letting them see and hear you do a transaction, or going to the pharmacy window and telling them that you need, whatever. So like, or actually even going and supporting someone as they're taking care of some personal business of their own. Like, how do you go to some place that's walkable in your community? How do you go to the library and say, I'd like to sign up for a library card? Or how do I check out books and when do I bring them back? And using a calendar lesson in that, and like, oh, I can keep this for 3 weeks. 3 weeks means here. Like really trying to use their experiences and help them integrate into the community as the basis for their language lessons, as the context for those lessons. Okay, let's see. Oh my gosh, there's so much happening in the chat. I can't keep up with it. It's amazing. Contextualizing language instruction. So think about, where are the places that students most need to use language? Like, what are their biggest concerns? And someone already asked about like getting a sense of what their skills are, but maybe even doing a needs assessment and saying like giving them pictures and having them vote on where are the places that they go the most, right? And maybe I'm thinking of folks who don't really have a lot of language skills yet. So using pictures to help them think about like, what is the most important place for you to go, and then building those experiences, contextualizing those experiences based on places they use the most. Because the places I go the most, those are the ones that I'm going to experience. Like, I want to experience the success. If you give them that success, they will be a lot more comfortable in that context right away, right? So how can you support their language learning around those most critical needs? If the critical need is medicine, how do we talk to our pharmacists? What the heck is this whole MyChart thing? How do I get around that? How do I call the doctor? How do I help them understand that I'm not using MyChart? How do I do that? Can you do a mock post office, a mock BMV window, a mock deli counter? Can you order a sandwich from Subway? Can you exchange something in the store? So you building language around the kinds of things that your learners are going to need. All right. So some tips for immigrant integration, a way to kind of help make the world smaller for them. First is that, I always think of, when I think about coordinating services, I think about the homeless services experience that I had here in Cleveland. So the shelters in Cleveland, during the day, at night, like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., you can come into the shelters. About 6 or 7 a.m., everyone has to leave the shelter. So folks are just kind of wandering around. They're in the libraries, whatever. So I walked in, but there is one church that opens their fellowship hall every day for people to come and get out of the heat or to get out of the cold and the snow and the rain. And then there are some social services that are in that space. And I remember going in that day, one day, to volunteer. And there was a young woman there who had 5 kids under 6, and she was expecting. And she was clearly due any single day. Like, she could have had that kid that day, and I wouldn't have been a least bit shocked about it. And she was asking for help. And the person who was helping her said, well, first you have to go to the city and get this. And then you have to go to such and such and get that. And then you have to go here to get that. And I'm thinking, she doesn't have the money. She doesn't have the transportation. She's not feeling well. She's expecting. She's got 5 little ones with her. Like, how is she going to go to all of these places, right? So how do we bring the resources to our students instead of having them, and you don't want to send them on a wild goose chase. It's already frustrating and frightening being here. So how do we bring services in-house for students so that they can start learning how to communicate with service providers? And also, I think sometimes service providers are a little bit more congenial in front of us than they are when they're interacting with students. I think there's a xenophobia thing. There's a whole socioeconomic bias thing. There's a whole, so there's so much that can go into that. But I think sometimes when we're around, people perform for us. And so they treat our students better, right? So how do we bring them to us? And then when you can't do that, how do you coordinate supportive services so that there aren't those gaps? We all feel that thing like, I don't know about you, but in Cleveland, I'm always like, why is transportation not a part of their county benefits? They all need transportation to get to medical, to training, to job, to school, whatever. Why don't we just do that? So we try to network things so that there aren't gaps in those services, right? So look at your system. Look at you're an instructor and you do job placement and you help displace workers and you're working with the kids and after school. How do you coordinate those services so that they're not gaps? What are the things that your clients, students feel are missing? And then how can you look at those gaps and then figure out, can you create a combined grant proposal to address the needs that are not being addressed by your programming? Can you find new partnerships to help do that? Maybe it won't be a grant. Maybe it will be a corporate sponsor that says, oh, we didn't realize that your kids didn't have backpacks. We're going to provide your backpacks. How do we do that? And then again, going back to those warm transfers. All right. So there was a really great project a couple years ago. You may have heard of it. If you haven't, they've got some really great resources. So EARN stands for Enhancing Access for Refugees and New Americans. And you can access all of these things on the Links website. The Links is the literacy information and communication system that Octay operates. Their website is links.ed.gov. I'll give you more information for that in just a moment. But it's that, so they did this project where they really looked at what information and resources are out there so they could kind of help to create this framework for immigrant integration. And so you can see that IELCE and IET are huge parts of that. They focus on the 3 pillars that we talked about: civic integration, linguistic integration, economic integration, and how we can support that within the adult education system. So you will all get a copy of this presentation, so you'll be able to look at this in a little bit greater detail, but this is basically showing how our adult education system can help support all 3 of those pillars of immigrant integration. And in addition to that, there's a video that I won't show as part of this session, but that you can look at here. And it's basically an example of how a program is using, they're using a pharmacy tech program as the context for their language learning. And so as the students are working towards their language learning, they're learning the skills, they're observing pharmacy technicians, and they're getting these skills that will serve as an on-ramp to other careers within the medical field. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you're thinking about how can you connect, this is a really good example of how they're doing that. Obviously, this is for your folks who are a little bit on the higher ends as far as their language skills are concerned, but this might be a way for you to think about how to do integrated education and training for your civics, your EL civics students. Excuse me. All right, so I wanted to share this story. So I shared the story with you earlier about the student who was one of the Lost Boys of Sudan, who was in the program that I worked in formerly. And I talked about how that student was in a TABE E for 9 years. Fortunately, I should also tell you that his tutor, for whatever reason, who's been coming for 14 years, decided she wasn't tutoring any longer. And so I was able to switch him to a different tutor and get him using different resources. And now he is reading, not just memorizing words, but actually decoding. So that's one good story. But the other thing, this is another example of what's possible. So Abraham was one of the Lost Boys of Sudan as well. He was able to go through literacy programs, get his bachelor's degree in physiology, got a master's degree in public health. He was a graduate fellow with the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and is now working on his doctorate in public health at Georgia Southern University. So he's working as a public health analyst for Northrop Grumman. So even though there are lots of barriers that students face when they first come to this country, and thinking about the situation in Sudan, that if he can come here and relocate and get education, interact with our programs, and get transitioned into post-secondary education and training, what is possible? Here's an example of what that can look like. And so I hope that as we're thinking about the students that we're helping, we're thinking about this, keeping these kinds of success stories in mind, because these are all possible. And I feel like this group of folks, you're the ones to help them get there. I just feel like I can feel the potential in this room. I'm so excited. I kind of feel like Ohio needs to step their game up a little bit. Okay. All right, so this is the links resource. They have a whole page on enhancing access for refugees and new Americans. So there's tons of links and resources that you can use there that will give you a little bit more information and a lot more detail. This was just to kind of whet your appetite for to whet your appetite and inspire you a little bit about how there are things that we can all do to help folks become integrated linguistically, economically, and civically in this country, and the ways that it benefits all of us. Um, so I am the moderator for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion community for Links. And my colleague, Jennifer Gagliardi, is over civics, education, and citizenship. And she is an incredible resource. So I would definitely encourage you to join the Links community. You can scan the QR code on your screen. If that doesn't work, you can go to links.ed.gov and click on community and join there. But she has she does an event every month. She does discussion board posts as well. If you go to her event, she has like 1,000 resources for every single thing that she does. So I would highly recommend connecting with Jennifer. She's very resourceful, very knowledgeable, very passionate about this topic. This is just the Links landing page. So this is how you log in to join one of the communities. I highly recommend them, not just because I'm a part of them, but because they are the folks in the field who are always in the know, and they really, really work hard to understand their particular areas and to bring in additional resources. We're not the experts. We like to bring in the experts throughout the field. There are resources in the slideshow as well. And then I'll leave my contact information. Oops, I didn't mean to advance beyond that slide. I'll leave my contact information in case anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn or anything like that. Oh, how did it go that far? Sorry. So I'll get to that last slide, and then you can have my information. And I'm going to look at the chat for just a moment to see if there are any other questions. Yeah, it looks like you all have such a good, oh yes. Kirsten, can you share, someone's asking about the information about the PD credit again? Can you share that again?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, someone says, FYI, since she said homeless, there's palpable tension between immigrant and homeless communities due to the resources being made available to refugees and migrants. Yeah, so please be intentional with the homeless communities in your areas you are within immigrant communities. They need just as much help. Absolutely. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so they just posted the information about the credits for your PD. I appreciate you all so much for even being in this field and doing this work. It is like, I don't understand why anyone wants to work anywhere else. Like, to me, this is the most rewarding thing I could do with my life and my time. And I appreciate meeting my people. And I have to come to Illinois and see you all at some point. It's like such a great group of folks. I appreciate all of your passion for sure. I mean, you guys have been amazing. And if there are any questions, if you want to unmute, raise your hand if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, and while everyone's thinking of questions, just some closing housekeeping items. We will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow that will have the link where you can find the slides and the recording from today, as well as a follow-up survey. We really appreciate your participation in that follow-up survey, because we do look at it on the WEO Professional Development Committee. We look at the data from all the survey. You can give feedback on Carmen's presentation, as well as let us know other Workforce Wednesday webinar topics that you might be interested in. And then we put the PD credit information in the chat, but we'll also have that in the follow-up email too.
Mm-hmm. We can also include some links about links. I hate to say links twice in the same sentence, but someone asked about information about links. So we can definitely share that. It's a free resource. Well, I shouldn't say free. We pay for it with our tax dollars. So use it. There's also a learner center that is totally underutilized on there. There are resources for learners that I don't think people recognize are on there. So check it out. I just saw a comment about assimilation and I missed it. This chat jumps around on me sometimes. I have to keep up with them. All right, wonderful. Oh, thank you. All right. Sarah and Tara, thank you so much for, this has been so much fun these last 2 weeks, and I wish we were doing more of them. This was really fun.
Thank you for coming. This is so wonderful.
Yeah, Carmen, thank you for your willingness to present to everyone. We really appreciate it. And I think if there's no other questions, we can go ahead and close out. Thank you so much. Thank you again to Carmen for her time, and to Sarah and Tara from SIPDC for setting these 2 webinars up the last 2 weeks. And everybody have a great rest of your Wednesday. Oh, Carmen Heather says, would you come back and take a deep dive with employment?
With employment, what do you mean specifically? Just helping with employment? Helping, is that like around immigrant integration and employment?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay. If you want.
Would love to have you back, Carmen. Trevor has his hand raised. Trevor, if you want to unmute.
Hey, yeah, we're always Office of Employment and Training, which is, the folks that kind of oversee the WIOA grant, for Illinois. We're always looking for people to talk about stuff we're just talking about. So, yeah, we'll help. We would love to have you too, I'm sure.
Okay, fantastic. I love traveling. It's my dream. I love this. I could do this all day.
Yeah, Trevor, I'll connect you and Carmen. I'll send an email introducing you both.
Okay. I will definitely come. Okay, but you're in Chicago. All right, Mark, I see that invitation.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Go ahead and close out. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Feel free to follow up with Carmen via her information on this slide if you want to reach back out to her. And thank you again, Carmen, so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.